You know what's strange? There's a generation that didn't just use the internet, they were shaped by it. Not as kids with parental controls, not as adults who logged on for work, but as teenagers, at the exact moment their identities were still forming. And now, they're adults, with bills, jobs, relationships, and a nervous system that never learned how to exist offline. I'm talking about the first generation raised by the internet, and then released into real life with no instruction manual, because the internet didn't just entertain them, it taught them. It taught them how to talk, how to argue, how to flirt, how to compare themselves to everyone all the time. It taught them that visibility equals value, that silence means irrelevance, that if something isn't posted, it might as well not exist. And that's fine when you're 16. It gets complicated when you're 30. Because adulthood demands things the internet never trained them for: patience, delayed gratification, ambiguity, long term thinking. Online, everything is instant. Feedback is immediate. Validation is quantified. In real life, effort can disappear into nothing for years. That gap creates a quiet psychological tension. Many adults raised online feel like they're constantly performing adulthood rather than inhabiting it. They know how to talk about productivity. They know how to aestheticize growth. But actually sitting with boredom, uncertainty, or slow progress feels unbearable. Psychologically, this makes sense. Your brain wires itself around the environment it grows up in. If your formative years trained you to expect constant stimulation, your nervous system struggles in environments that move slowly, like careers, relationships, or long-term goals. Let me illustrate this better for you. There's a kid, maybe 12, scrolling through TikTok or YouTube. They're learning social dynamics in comment sections. They're learning who's popular, who's funny, who's worth listening to. They're learning that being noticed online is survival, not because they chose to, but because the algorithm demanded it. Every like, every share, every notification becomes a tiny measure of worth. And something shifts. Psychologists call this digital socialization, the process of a child learning to navigate complex social hierarchies online. But that term doesn't capture the weight of it. It doesn't capture the tension of being small and still performing for a world bigger than you, a world where the stakes feel like life and death. Many people who grew up this way notice they develop exceptional digital skills. They can read a situation in an instant, predict what someone will post or say, problem solve in a chaotic environment. But, and this is crucial, these are not social superpowers in the traditional sense. They're survival adaptations. The nervous system learns: pay attention, perform, be relevant, stay visible. And that survival wiring tends to linger. Now, here's where it starts to show up in adulthood. Often, people who grew up online become the ones everyone relies on in crisis: the mediator, the person everyone looks to for advice or guidance. They're attracted to people who need fixing, not because they have a savior complex, but because being needed feels like love, the only love they learned to recognize. Relationships can get complicated. Intimacy feels exposing because vulnerability was a luxury they couldn't afford. Even now, with someone who genuinely cares, there's a part of them that cannot let their guard down. They might be drawn to emotionally unavailable partners. Before blaming themselves, they need to understand this: unavailable feels familiar. It feels like home. Because home was a place where attention was conditional, where affection was measured by performance, where being offline felt like being invisible. And control shows up too, not in a toxic sense, but a deep primal need to manage every variable in their environment. Because unpredictability once meant social consequences online: being unseen, being mocked, being left out. So they plan, overthink, run through dozens of scenarios before making even the smallest offline decision. People might call them type A, anxious, perfectionist. But what they're really seeing is a nervous system that learned letting your guard down has consequences. And the exhaustion is real: bone deep tiredness that sleep can't fix. Not laziness, not weakness. Just a nervous system in overdrive since childhood. Here's something that might hit hard. A lot of people who grew up online have a complicated relationship with success. They achieve amazing things. They build, they create, they perform. But it rarely feels like enough, because early on their worth was tangled with visibility, likes, and performance, and society rewards it. We are productive, independent, resilient, we get things done. But nobody asks, what did it cost to become this way? You also become fluent in a language most people never learn: emotional labor. You can manage conflict, smooth tension, keep people comfortable, not online or offline, while quietly drowning inside. And the strangest part, you might not even notice you're doing it anymore. It's automatic, like breathing. Except breathing is supposed to keep you alive. This slowly empties you out. You probably have moments where you're surrounded by people, friends, family, co workers, and you still feel completely alone. Not lonely in the obvious sense, alone in the sense that nobody really sees how hard you're working to keep everything smooth, to keep everyone else okay. Asking for recognition feels like defeat, like admitting you were never really free. So, what do you do with all of this? How do you heal from something you're not sure even counts as trauma? Because it wasn't one big event, it was thousands of small moments of being too much and not enough at the same time. First, you have to grieve. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's real. You're grieving the childhood you didn't get offline, the version of you who could have been messy, imperfect, and still been loved. And saying it out loud doesn't make you ungrateful, it makes you honest about the truth. Secondly, you have to learn that being needed isn't the same as being valued. Your worth isn't measured by likes, followers, or how well you manage other people's emotions. You are not a human doing. You're a human being. Being is enough. You're allowed to rest, to not have all the answers, to fall apart, to receive without performing first. And maybe most importantly, you're allowed to be a beginner at being cared for because that's what you are. You never really learned it growing up online. Be patient with yourself. That child who grew up on the internet, they did an incredible job navigating a world they weren't ready for. They were resourceful, brave, strong beyond measure. But now they can rest. They're not forced to perform anymore. It's safe to let someone else take the lead. It's safe to just exist. You've been holding on so tight for so long. What would it feel like to finally let go? This is Humans Behave. Subscribe if you want to understand what's really going on beneath the surface.